Hello, my name's Rhiannon Firth and I did my PhD at the University of Nottingham in politics and international relations, and my research interests are utopianism and counterculture, radical politics and protest. Today I've been at Nottingham Contemporary Art Gallery giving a talk on the works of Piero Gilardi, and I decided to concentrate on his works after he quit formal art world and became involved in political movements such as the radical left and the anti-psychiatry movement and environmental politics. So what I've been talking about today is I had a little look about how puppets, for some reason, have had a really intense resonance with radical politics throughout their history. Beginning in about 600 AD in the 16th century, puppets were often used as part of the church, but they would often be banned for idolatry and so on. And then in the 14th century in southern Europe, they became part of pre-Lenten carnivals when there'd often be a lot of drinking and disruption and satire and criticism of political figures. In the 17th century, during the transition from the pastoral economy to industrial capitalism, Cromwell banned theatre as a form of propaganda, and the only kind of theatre that actually continued was puppetry. And this again was often very radical and subversive, would parody figures of power and political figures and authority figures. Again, sort of between the two world wars and in the 1930s, theatre and puppetry was taken up by Marxists, and it was seen as a radical, an effective form of propaganda. And then in the 1960s, we had the beginning of the radical protest puppetry movement as we see it today, with Peter Schumann, who founded the theatre group Bread and Circuses, and then sort of moving forward to Seattle protests and the alter-globalisation movements. Giant puppets, particularly in the United States and also in southern Europe, are sort of a huge part of radical and subversive politics, and they're often created for protests. So some of the things we've been looking at today in the Piero Gilardi exhibition are these beautiful giant puppets that would be taken out on protests. Why do puppets have such a resonance with subversive politics, and particularly with sort of the kind of anarchistic or anti-hierarchical politics that characterises anti-austerity and anti-globalisation movements today? Participants came up with some ideas of their own. We were particularly interested in the fact that they can sort of visibilise hidden oppression, hierarchies, and the kind of things that we might not have realised that were oppressing us or disturbing us by sort of putting these right in front of us. They can also parody political figures. They can be used as effigies, things like Guy Fawkes, and also statues of George Bush being torn down as a parody of the statue of Saddam Hussein being torn down. And so there's all these sort of ideas of parody and mocking and also destruction of authority figures. Protesters often don't seek to convey a single message to the mainstream media, whilst the mainstream media sort of seeks this and asks for this. They operate through a sort of anti-representative politics where they don't accept having a single spokesman for their movement. So often sort of creating these puppets in a communal egalitarian kind of way can be a way to come together and convey something and capture the attention of the public and mainstream media without necessarily misrepresenting very diverse movements. Sort of ideas of the carnivalesque and the circus as being sort of transgressive practices often sits well with people expressing identities differently and so on. We sort of ended our discussion with an interesting talk about the fact that these puppets have now been sort of moved back into an art gallery, and that perhaps there's some kind of contradiction or tension there of these sort of radical things, rather than being destroyed or captured, as they often are at the end of protests, being sort of recuperated back into the art gallery. And we had an interesting discussion over what the artists may have thought of that and what radical protesters might think.